My wife and I bought a ranch in the mountains last year, and my neighbour had some interesting suggestions on how to manage our new land. Part 3. The Bear Chase. Let's get straight into that. The lights came 3 more times before spring rolled over, all of which happened when Sasha and I were home together. It seemed to get easier every time. Even the dogs seemed to gather it. It was just a new routine of ours. As May come to a close, we started to discuss the next manifestation of the spirit more. Dan and Lucy called it the Bear Chase and described it with pretty frightening language. Sasha wanted to take it seriously, and deep down I felt the same. Even so, over the last weeks I found a state of relative peace by disregarding the imminence of this bear chase. I had no explanation for the spring lights, but I just didn't have the bandwidth to embrace a separate and unrelated mystical phenomenon as real without seeing it first. I'm just not wired that way. As mentioned earlier, Sasha worked from home most days, so one evening in late May, we opened up Dan and Lucy's handwritten suggestions on how to deal with the bear chase, reviewed them, and developed a bit of a protocol for this, if this were to happen while she was here alone. What follows are the excerpts from what Dan and Lucy wrote about this particular manifestation of the spirit. You almost always hear the naked man screaming before you see him. First step, visually locate the man. He'll be running directly for whichever of you is closest to him when he manifests. He has about a 40-yard lead on the bear at all times, and they have the same jogging speed, so distance between them only shrinks when the man stopped at the obstruction between you and him. Second step, after locating him, find structure to put between yourself and the man. He cannot open doors or gates, cannot break through rigid materials such as glass and wood, or climb over vertical objects 3 to 4 feet high or higher. The fence around your yard and house is more than sufficient. If you're outside this fence when it starts and cannot make it back, crawl under or jump over any of the cattle fences in a pasture around your property. He cannot cross these if they're properly maintained at livestock fence ratings. If possible, getting a vehicle is a good option. Once there is an obstruction between you and him, he will stop running, get as close to you as possible, cry and plead, but the bear will get him. He wants to hurt you, no matter how sincere his desperation and terror seem. The bear cannot hurt or touch you or other animals. The bear is your friend. The naked man can hurt you if he comes into contact, and we strongly suggest shooting the man if possible. Allowing him to get close is very unsafe. It may seem strange at first, but after watching him get devoured a few times, you will find it is the most efficient method. He dies like any man would from a gunshot. Kill or incapacitate him with a firearm, and the bear will drag him away. Sasha and I already read it 100 times and still made us shake our heads in disbelief. I don't think any reasonably minded person would open Dan and Lucy's hard copy of guidelines and think it anything more than a manic screed of nonsense, let alone lend it credence. That being said, even the prospect of this craziness coming to fruition while Sasha were here alone made it palatable to temporarily engage this babble with legit sincerity. Plus, developing real-life plans made both of us feel better. I mean, we had general protocols we discussed for what to do when a black bear, grizzly bear, wolves, a bull moose, mountain lion, or a pack of coyotes came around. Why not this crazy shit as well? I absolutely refused to allow even a suggestion of shooting some guy who ran onto our property trying to escape a bear. First of all, I still wasn't 100% convinced any of this shit was real. And second, our property is adjacent to a national forest, with the closest trails only a mile up the mountain from our property. Trail systems used by literally tens of thousands of hikers, campers, mountaineers, climbers, horseback riders, wildlife photographers, hunters, anglers, and others throughout the season. And furthermore, there are actual grizzly bears and black bears in this area. Thus, there's a real-life possibility, albeit slim, that an actual person could end up getting chased by an actual bear onto our property. I wasn't going to institute some kill order on strangers getting pursued by predators. That's just fucking insane. I taught Sasha to shoot a few different firearms. She was decent with shotguns and pretty good with a .22 rifle. We agreed that for the rest of the summer, no listening to music while outside so we can hear, and if this ridiculous event actually came to pass when she was outside and home alone, she'd make sure she and the dog were inside the fence, but to leave the dog if it came down to it. Once inside the fence, lock herself inside the house, grab the .22 rifle and wait until the bear got the dude. Dan and Lucy came by at least once a week to drop off fresh baked bread or an extra tool they had lying around. As much stress, confusion and frustration as their narrative of hauntings had brought me, it was undeniable that they were, otherwise, absolutely amazing neighbours. Dan was pretty busy running an active livestock operation with only seasonal help, and I worked a 9 to 5, but Sasha started joining Lucy on her afternoon walks up our road in the National Forest. They'd bring Dash along as they looked for mushrooms, birds, flowers, and just talk about life. Lucy told Sasha about her and Dan's 3 grown children, 2 sons and a daughter, and the challenges of raising children around these things. While Sasha worked remotely, she had to go into her firm in Jackson Hole for usually about a week every quarter, and this summer it would be the first week of June. We moved to Idaho side of the Tetons from Jackson after living there for a couple of years, leaving behind a great crew of friends. Not having many people our age in the area was one of the hardest parts of living out here, and so Sash left Friday evening to enjoy the weekend with friends. I was psyched for some solo time and to get some work done around the land, and particularly clearing out the decades worth of debris building up in the creek bed. On Saturday I woke up. I fed the dog, crushed some coffee and breakfast, and made a sandwich for lunch. I started loading a wheelbarrow with a shovel, rake, pickaxe, rock bar, and Sasha called me to check in to say good morning. As we were saying goodbye, she said, "Babe, don't forget." Forget what? I asked. Don't forget the plan. Seriously, Harry, that bear chase plan we made doesn't just apply to me, alright? That's not fair. Promise you'll have a rifle with you today and not listen to music so you can hear while you're working. Christ almighty, I thought. I promise, babe. I have brought one anyway. The real bears of the world are all woken up now and must be pretty damn hungry after their winter naps. And so I opened up the gun safe and reached for my .30-06 hunting rifle, but stopped as my hand passed by the barrel of my .556 carbine I'd built. They don't let you keep your service weapon when you retire from their inventory, but at the time I had gladly opted to keep my rifle in exchange for the honourable discharge, written in fancy letters at the top of my DD-256 certificate. I felt naked without it. I felt alone without it. I made it a week into civilian life before I started building a rifle that was as close as possible to the M4 I rucked around Afghanistan. And besides lacking a full auto rates of fire option, it ended up amazingly similar. Same grip, optics, sights, stock, rail, barrel, sling, all that shit. Only real cosmetic difference was how goddamn clean this rifle was. It's crazy how pristine a rifle stays when you're not living outside in the dusty mountains and using it as a third arm. I turned it over in my hands and felt the old, familiar weight. And for me, just holding a damn thing is like smelling your grandparents' house or something. Just a deep familiarity. I guess it's the safety blanket. Why not? I thought. I grabbed one of its mags and walked out to the wheelbarrow and dropped it on top of the tools, even telling it aloud, "You need a few scratches, darling. Adds character." Dash and I spent the next 5 hours dredging stream channels of logs, branches, clumps of leaves and roots, and rocks that clogged up over the last decade. The spring runoff made the water ice cold. But it was a pretty hot day, and so it was satisfying work, and the dog was happier than a pig in mud, playing in the water and chasing grasshoppers. Around 2 p.m, I walked up the hillside from the stream to a rock outcropping in the sun, where I sat and chugged water and wolfed down my sandwich. Dash laid at my feet as I was plucking small clumps of dried mud from his paws when, all of a sudden, he shot up to a full standing position, startling the hell out of me, and looked to the southeast, towards the tree line and boundary with the national forest. I looked as well, but I didn't see anything. I can't deny, my first thought was, naked bear dude? Nope. No naked bear dude to be seen or heard. I sat there a while, staring at the tree line, straining my senses, but all I could hear was the stream competing with the symphonic cadence of the crickets. I stood up and Dash looked up at me, and I grabbed a stick from the grass, held it down to where it almost touched his nose, and smiled at him, then threw it down to the slope in a meadow towards where I'd left the wheelbarrow on the bank of the stream. He didn't move, didn't even follow the stick through the air with his eyes. He just held his gaze locked on me and then looked back to the tree line. At that moment, adrenaline surged into my hands and face. Now, I've had this dog on my side for 6 years. He's a full-on, incurable, pathological fetch junkie. Never, and I mean not one solitary time, has he ever been in the vicinity of a thrown object and not chased after it. He could be fast asleep in a yard. Someone throws something quietly, and some primal instinct shoots to signal into his brain that there is something to fetch. And so him not fetching means he's either extremely sick or something else of profound significance to his little dog brain gripped his attention. I looked back at the tree line. "What is it, buddy?" Dash looked at me briefly and then back at the forest, and began to lower his head while keeping his eyes level. Well, that's his cue for there's something sketchy to pay attention to, and this time I was almost running down the hill towards the wheelbarrow on the bank of the stream where my rifle was, and yelling for Dash to follow me. He beat me to the stream and fell back into his "what the fuck over there" posture, with an unbreaking gaze on the southeast. The second I touched the grip on my rifle, muscle memory activated. I threw the sling over my shoulder, slammed the magazine into the magwell, yanked the charging handle back, and thumbed the safety off as I brought the scope to my eye in one old familiar motion. And I scanned the entire tree line, listening as closely as I could, and then the crickets stopped. Not all the crickets in the valley, but I mean like 95% of the crickets within earshot immediately went silent. I'm not sure I've ever heard that happen before. Frogs, when you walk too close to a pond at night, sure, they'll shut up quick, but crickets, in the heat of the day, never had that. And then I heard it, a man yelling. It was coming generally from the east-southeast. No discernible words, but holy shit was there a discernible tone. Panic. My heart rate spiked immediately, and my face went numb with adrenaline. I was walking backwards with my rifle shouldered, yelling at Dash to follow me, and the stream ran another 35 yards or so in the direction I was moving before it ran into a big culvert under my driveway and out into the pasture on the other side. I had just seriously beefed up all of the cattle fencing along the driveway, and getting on the other side of that fence was my objective. And for a split second, "Congrats, Dan. You got me dancing through more of your spirit-warding pagiantry," ran through my mind. But that was interrupted by the first audible word that punched its way out of the stentorian of panicked yelling. "Help!" I was in a slight depression along the stream, and so the meadow to the southeast was obscured by the rise, but I knew that was where it was coming from. I was maybe 20 yards from the fence line now, and Dash still hadn't moved, barking in a direction and yelling, legs splayed out, head low and teeth bared, like a damn coyote. I added a lot of volume and some snarl into one more, "Dash, come!" and he turned around and booked it after me. I turned a second later and sprinted towards the fence line. As we reached a little rise leading up to the driveway, I looked over my shoulder and saw, for a split second, what looked like a naked man waving his hands above his head, and it felt like my gut hit the back of my throat. I slung my rifle across my back, picked up Dash, and dropped him over the fence onto the driveway. I planted my foot near the middle strand along the T-post and hoisted myself over. I stumbled as I landed, but caught myself with a palm in the gravel, pulled my rifle around, spun and brought the scope to my eye. I let out an audible gasp as I beheld what was filling the reticle of my optic. It was a naked man running through the field and down the slope of the meadow towards the opposite bank of the stream where I had left the wheelbarrow. He looked a bit older than me, maybe 38 or 40. He had a splotchy short beard and short unkempt hair on the same sandy brown. His bare feet were bleeding, and his tallywhacker, as Dan had promised, was flapping around for the world to see. He was looking straight at me, through the scope and directly into my eye. He looked terrified, desperate, exhausted, almost defeated. I could hear him more clearly now. "Help! Please wait! Help! Help me, please! Please, he's gonna kill me! Sir, please! Please!" Holy shit, I couldn't fucking believe it. This was it. Dash was going absolutely ballistic, snarling and barking like a fiend. And then I saw the bear behind him. I glassed it, and it looked, all things considered, like any of the many black bears I'd seen before. It was certainly a nice size, around 400 pounds, male, but nothing nightmarish or unnatural. Other than it not charging as fast as I know black bears are capable, I switched back to the man, who was now about to splash through the creek, switching his gaze from me, over his shoulder to the bear, and then back again. I could see he was crying. "Please, sir, please, don't leave me to die. Please help, help me, please." My internal dialogue was a manic frenzy. I should shoot the bear, just shoot the fucking bear, man. Dan never said not to. What if this is real? What if this is a fucking coincidence and I'm gonna let someone get mauled? The man was about to emerge from the stream between me and the wheelbarrow, and the bear was gonna drop into a nice spot for me to get a clean shot at its vitals. And that's when I thought of something. There's a wheelbarrow full of sharp 5-foot tools directly ahead of the man. If I was being chased by a bear, I'd fucking beeline for one of those tools, no question at all. There's a shovel, a pickaxe, and a goddamn rock bar directly ahead of him. I started screaming right back to the man. "Grab the shovel! Grab the rock bar! Dude, grab the rock bar or pickaxe and defend yourself! Dude, get one! It's a black bear. You're supposed to fight back. If you hit it with a shovel, it'll back off. Fight back!" He was close enough to hear every word I said, but he didn't break his pleading. He didn't stop to listen to me. He was almost at the wheelbarrow. "Dude, grab the shovel and fight! Fight back, dude, fight!" He ran right past it. He ran right past the wheelbarrow full of things to defend himself with. Dude! What the fuck, man? I felt tears welling in my eyes. Dash was snarling, and the man was maybe 25 yards off now, still pleading and crying. "Sir, please save me. Please, sir. Please just help me. Help me, please, sir. Please." I couldn't talk. I could barely breathe. An abridged version of my old combat panic mantra kicked in. Deep breath. You need to move. Deep breath. You need to move. I grabbed Dash by his collar and started hauling him up the driveway. I kept yelling at the man as I went. "Dude, why not fight it? Why did you not fight it?" I wanted a human answer out of him. I wanted some kind of human fucking response, any kind of phrase or sentence that was even remotely responsive to what I was saying. And everything he was babbling was just so repetitive. And at this point, it was actually strange for him to not respond at all, even if he was terrified and in shock. I thought of trying something else, and yelled out to him over his pleading, as he was about 10 yards away now, approaching the slope up to the driveway and starting to slow down. "Sir, tell me your name and I'll pull you over the fence. Sir, tell me your fucking name and I'll kill the bear. Tell me your fucking name, sir." He didn't stop his pleading and weeping. He didn't even register I was talking. It was unnatural. It's like he had a script. I expected him to at least shut up for a second when I spoke, but he didn't. He began coming over the rise of the fence line, and he was only a few feet from me now. I had my rifle trained right on his sternum. Dash was barking less, but was growling and keeping his eyes on the man as he adjusted the course of his flight diagonally up the slope to continue, following us as I moved up the driveway. We were all so close now, I could tell what the dog was looking at, and he didn't even register the bear was there, only the guy. As the guy got to the fence, I screamed at Dash to heel behind me, and which he did. The man grasped the top strand of the fence with both hands between the barbs, and was looking at me while openly weeping like a child, barely getting coherent words out. I was, for whatever reason, still talking to him. "Dude, I'll kill the bear if you say your name. Just say your name, dude." I even made a flamboyant display of moving to his right and aiming at the bear while maintaining eye contact with him. "Tell me your fucking name. I'll kill it. Say any person's name and I'll kill it, dude." Oh, it's like he couldn't even hear me. Please, sir. Please help me over the fence. Please don't let me die like this, please." I was still screaming at him over his babbling when the bear reached him. The bear rose up on its hind legs right behind where the man was standing and sunk its claws into his right shoulder, immediately cutting into him like razors, opening deep white gashes in his skin and muscle, and I watched quickly fill with blood. At the same time, the bear clamped its jaws down on the space between the neck and collarbone on his left side. I saw the man's eyes go wide with pure childlike horror before the bear pulled him back. The man fell onto his butt in a sitting position and began grabbing at the bear's face, trying to wrench his jaws free. A bright crimson braid of blood was streaming from the bite between his neck and the collarbone, pouring down his chest and stomach into his pubic hair. His screaming took on a new, much higher pitch. I'd heard it before. It was the jittery, panicked screaming of absolute life-changing pain. The bear tried dragging him backwards at that awkward angle, but released its bite. The man desperately rolled forward onto his hands and knees, his mouth wide, crying again in slow, defeated sobs, and as he started to crawl towards me, the bear ripped its claw through the man's shoulder blade, turning the man's right side towards the sky, then bit down into the exposed pale flesh, right at the base of the man's ribcage. The bear shook its head violently, and I could hear the ribs cracking as I watched the man's eyes squeeze shut, fists clench, and pain wince through his entire body like an electric shock. And with its jaw still clamped on the man's lower ribcage and stomach, it put a dinner plate-sized claw on each side of its large head, as though to brace itself, one on the man's chest and one on his hip, and then pulled with ferocious strength. I could see the lower portion of the ribcage splinter, like wood, as it began flipping outward, and below the cap of pale stomach skin in the bear's mouth, following glistening strands of intestines that coiled from the man's trunk, making it look like a grotesque jellyfish. The man's eyes rolled back in his head momentarily as he let out a guttural moan, and then he looked down at his new wound, and his eyes widened in shock as he began gasping as though he had just jumped into a cold lake. The bear released the mouth full of skin, rib splinters and guts, and with its claws yanked the man onto his back. The bear then looked down at the man almost curiously, who looked up at its feral eyes and let out a scream louder than any thus far. And just as the bear clamped its jaws down on his face, each jaw seemingly to reach all the way to the man's ears, abruptly muffling the man's scream like a pillow. The man frantically kicked his legs, pounding and clawing at the beast's jet black fur on its massive shoulders, and then the bear started shaking the man's head violently from side to side. I heard it then, a deep, wet crack at the man's neck. The man's right leg shot out straight away from him, toes in point like a ballerina, as his nerves fired their last salvo, and then every muscle in his body went limp. The bear let the man's head drop, licked a couple of times at the blood that started to leak out of the man's ears, and then looked up at me and sauntered 3 or 4 steps towards the fence. I was shocked. I shuffled backwards, almost tripping over myself, and swung the rifle up to level it straight at the bear's head. I was about to scream, but then I saw Dash pass by me, taking a few steps towards the fence. And then I realized the bear wasn't looking at me, it was looking at Dash. I was about to pull the trigger and scream at Dash at the same second when I noticed Dash's tail was wagging. I hesitated. And then, I swear on my life and soul, I watched the bear nod at my fucking dog. Yes, Nod. It was subtle, but it was a fucking nod, unmistakable. The likes of which you'd give someone passing on a sidewalk. Dash just stared back at the bear and seemingly responded by a momentary increased tail wagging speed. The bear looked up at me for a half a second, slowly turned around, walked back to the man, clamped its jaws down on the man's upper arm, and began dragging the ravaged corpse away. The thick strand of the man's innards trailed behind him, which I couldn't take my eyes off as it snagged on clumps of grass, picking up flecks of gravel and dirt as the bear dragged him away. I was entranced by it. I broke my gaze away when I realised Dash was licking my hand. I also realised tears were pouring down my cheeks, and that I'd dropped my rifle to dangle by its shoulder sling under my arm. I deliberately took a deep breath, which immediately became a reflexive and desperate gasp for air, as I, or my brain, realised I hadn't inhaled in far too long. I put my hand on my chest and got my breathing under control. My mouth tasted like vomit. Had I puked? No. Or maybe. I don't think so. What the fuck? I took a knee and put my arms around Dash, who just wagged his plume of golden retriever tail and licked my face. That really brought me back down to earth. I thought back on the whole experience and scooted back to take Dash's head in my hands and look him in the eye. I didn't expect to, but I just wheezed the question out anyway. Dash, buddy, did you just fucking communicate with that bear? Not sure what I expected there. Dash just remained a normal slightly out-of-breath dog. And what was shocking is how normal he seemed though. How relieved. He seemed exactly as he had on the 5 occasions this spring when we'd start a fire and the light in the pond would disappear. I walked up to the house and collapsed under one of the hose spigots, where I must have chugged a gallon of water. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, but it was a familiar haze. Felt just like I had before, after getting a gunfight, after having been awake for 35 hours, full-on battle fatigue. That evening, I sat on the porch with a beer and called Sasha. I lied to her, told her I had a fine day. I was super tired. I didn't want her to cancel her work week, which she would, in order to come back here. Decided I'd tell her when she got back Friday. I sat on the porch for a while, drinking and thinking. I came to 2 conclusions. First, this shit was real. Real as anything else in this life. And second, I could never, under any circumstances, let Sasha deal with that bear chase shit alone. I couldn't concentrate at work on Monday at all. Got a bit easier Tuesday, and even easier Wednesday. By Thursday, I actually felt half decent. Definitely a bit emotionally removed, and maybe still a bit shocked. I mean shit, my entire grasp on the order of the natural world had just been sodomized by a deceptively murderous naked demon man and a non-corporeal black bear. A bear I'd spent a lot of time thinking about and concluded internally to be actually pretty chill. Thus, I consider my continuous state of emotional confusion justified. But I was still taking it all in a relative stride. I cashed in one of my vacation days, Friday, so I could be home when Sash got back in the afternoon. And to start on the sun rain shed we were going to build for some sheep Dan and Lucy were going to turn out onto our pastures to eat down the grass. We decided to put it up in the woods above the house, between some trees where the sheep would spend the heat of the day anyway, and Dan had dropped off most of the materials the week before, which we trucked up to the building site. Friday morning, I filled a wheelbarrow with tools, my rifle, got the dog and walked up there to get to work. Around 10 a.m. I was on the ladder, screwing a truss in place when I saw Dash stand up slowly from where he was laying near the tarped over pile of lumber. I didn't even have to think about it this time. I was down and putting the rifle sling over my shoulder in 5 seconds flat, following the dog's gaze and listening for yelling. I didn't hear anything. I looked back to the dog. "What do you hear, bud?" He was in his what the fuck posture, and so I figured screw this, we're going on into full proactive defense mode, and began taking fast strides down the hill towards the gate into our fenced yard, calling after Dash to follow me. We were near the fence gate when Dash froze, lowered his head and let out a low growl towards the eastern property boundary. And then I heard it. A man yelling in a deep voice. My heart rate got some skip in its step, to be sure, but I kept my head this time. I went over, grabbed Dash by the collar and hauled him through the gate, shutting it behind me. I ran up to the house where I could get a better view of the forest along the eastern property line, and didn't even have to use my scope to see the commotion. And then a naked man burst out the forest, waving his arms and screaming for help. I looked up at the sky and closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. As I exhaled, I was almost surprised by the emotion overtaking me. Rage. Rage ushered out the panic, and so I welcomed it. I was furious. I hated this man, this spirit, this land. The prospect of Sasha being in danger here, all of it. The world started to go red. I took some deep breaths and got a grip and scoped the scene. And just like before, crying, begging, waving his hands, dick flapping around, same guy, same haircut, same shit. The allure of the man's act seemed to have washed away though. As I walked to the corner of the fence, I realized I wanted him, or it, to feel real fear, real anger. I wanted to actually hurt whatever was behind that terrified face. Watching him come at me, the manipulative and cruel nature of this whole help me act, it just floored me. Never before had I felt how I did in that moment. I wanted to cause a deep, real, authentic pain too, whatever or whoever the ventriloquist of this repulsive spectacle was. I needed another close look at the guy. I wanted to see if I could get anything else out of the spirit underneath. I wanted to bully it, torture it. He was about 45 yards off, and I tried to keep my cool and block out his weeping as he came jogging through the meadow to the spot in the fence I'd picked. I needed to see his real self. Without touching him, I wanted to see the spirit. And what could I say to get that? What could I do? He was about 10 feet away and started slowing down, sucking in air. His fingers laced around chain links in the fence as he pressed his face between his hands, weeping and begging. What did this thing want? Why engage in all this fuckery only for the people who live here? No idea why he did what he did next, but it popped into my head, and I only had about 7 or 8 seconds before the bear got here, and so I just went with it. I lowered the barrel of my rifle. I stepped at the guy, getting about 12 inches from his face. I looked at him square in the eye, leaned my face in and said very clearly, "This land is mine now. I took it from you, and you'll never, ever get it back." Then I spat onto his feet, looked back into his eyes, and I mustered up the most ridiculous, provocative, shit-eating grin of a smile I could possibly summon. And with surprising abruptness, his whole demeanour changed. The desperation, sadness, and misery left his face. All of the terror and dread that was twisting his features left as though it was a mask getting yanked off his face. His expression was that of pure, emotional antagonism. He then looked past me and gazed to the west. The bear was maybe 15 feet behind him, starting to check his speed and get ready to attack. I watched the man's forehead wrinkle slightly. He looked almost confused or curious. And then it appeared something had registered to him, like he realized something, like he had just woken up and finally recognized what he was. He looked back into my eyes with what looked almost like urgency flushed into his features. And then I saw it. A subtle flicker of anger came across his face. And I shot him. I put a bullet right into his left tear duct, maybe 2 seconds before the bear was going to rip him off the fence. His head snapped back, his fingers slackened around the chain links, and a cloud of pink mist, skull fragments, and brain matter haloed his entire upper body as it all caught the mid-morning sunlight. His head lolled back towards me. His left eye and the bridge of his nose were a total fucking mess, while his right eye looked to have almost popped all the way out, but found a bit of purchase right before committing. His jaw worked up and down as the last electricity in his synapses sputtered out, blood pouring out of his mouth, and then he crumpled. The bear looked from the naked corpse up into my eyes. The man's blood and grey matter were flecked into the fur around those wild predator eyes. I held its gaze, and then it looked past me to the dog. I looked over at Dash as well, then back at the bear, and just like before, the bear nodded to my dog, looked back up at me briefly, and then dug its jaws into the corpse's shin and calf and dragged it off into the meadow. Sasha got home, and I told her everything, every last detail, except for what I said to the man that morning before I shot him. Not sure why, but I felt that was between me and him. And she understood why I didn't tell her about the first encounter, but demanded I never do that again, which I promised. We took the dog and walked through the entire first encounter, like it was a movie scene, and then the second, and when there were still brains and blood outside our fence line, evincing the crescendo of this morning's encounter. Sash called Lucy, so she and Dan both came over, and so I had to go through it all over again. They both said it sounded pretty standard. When I asked about the bear nodding to the dog, they said they had a few encounters with a naked man when they had horses nearby, who got terribly spooked by the man. And when the bear arrived, it did something very similar, which had an immediate calming effect on the animals. Lucy said, "I think the bear is here to bring balance, equilibrium. If the dark spirit gets a chance with the man, a good spirit gets a chance with the bear." Over the course of the rest of the summer, it happened 3 more times. The next was almost a full month later, in early July. I was in the shower, and Sasha was in the garden. I heard her come running into the house, yelling for me. I burst out as, naked as the demon bastard I assumed from Sasha's tone, was currently trouncing through my meadow in all of his panicked, frenzied glory. I barked at her to make sure the gates were all shut. "Babe, obviously I already did that," she said, looking at me like a little toddler. God damn, she's solid. I grabbed my safety blankets out of the gun safe, ran outside and spotted him coming up at us from near the pond. I braced my rifle on the porch pillars and waited for him to turn towards the house. And when he did, I put a bullet into the top of his chest plate, right where it parts below the neck, and he crumpled like a sack of potatoes. God, I love this rifle. We watched the bear stare at us for a moment, or maybe at our dog, and then turn and drag the corpse away. Sasha was absolutely mesmerized and asked all about what happens if he gets any closer, and we went through the first 2 encounters again. The 4th time was about 3.5 weeks later, in early August, and I wasn't even there for it. I came home from work that evening and saw Dan and Lucy's truck in the driveway, and when I walked up and went through the gate into our yard, they were all on the porch, Dan, Lucy, Sasha, and Dash. I could tell from the vibe that something was strange. Sasha had a half-guilty, half-satisfied look on her face, and Dan and Lucy wore similar expressions. What's going on, guys?" I asked. Sasha stood up and said, "I did it. I killed a naked man. It happened around lunchtime." I immediately launched into her. "Sash, what the hell? Why didn't you tell me?" She put up a finger and said, "Babe, don't even start. You didn't tell me for a damn week after your first encounter. I just wanted to let you finish the workday without panicking, alright?" She had a point. Turns out, it was a lot like my second encounter, but she was already in the yard. It was a gusty day, so the trees were rustling pretty loud. She said her and Dash heard the man pretty much at the same time. She threw Dash inside, grabbed the .22 rifle, set it up in a comfortable shooting position on the outdoor dining table, and waited for him to get to the fence. And when he did, she said she shot him, right in the forehead, as soon as he slowed down. And she was proud, and, well, so was I. Dan and Lucy poured praise on her composure and decision-making, and for the 100th time I'd heard it that summer, said, "Getting behind that fence, that's what's important." They really were like weird old grandparents. And the 5th and final time was a late August evening, and Sasha was inside and I was out in the meadow, coming back from a short hike up the mountain into the national forest. I was about to the pond with Dash and he froze. I'd grown to trust his instincts more than ever before, and so I looked to where he was looking. I didn't see anything, and started jogging towards the gate in the fence around the yard, and I heard the man's screams start when I was about 20 yards away. I had to double back to grab Dash's collar to get him to come along. He really wanted to fight that naked bastard. I got through the gate, closed it behind me, and ran into the yard a bit to look around a cottonwood tree so I could confirm the front gate was also closed. Then turned to watch the now awkwardly familiar song and dance of the naked man. I had gone hiking with my .44 revolver, which was holstered on my belt next to a can of bear spray. I knew it was, but as I walked towards the south fence where I figured the naked man and I'd have our little one-on-one, I thumbed open the cylinder and made sure it was fully loaded, and snapped it closed again. Dash went into a frenzy as he got closer, and Sasha ran out to the kitchen onto the porch, wide-eyed. "Harry, what is it?" I waved at her and then pointed out to the man. He showed up right when I got back to the property. "It's all good. We're all good." She came down and stood about 20 feet behind me, with Dash between her legs, holding him by the collar. I looked back at her and we exchanged nervous grins, and then she said, "Ever expect to be dispatching naked ghosts before supper, babe?" And we both laughed. "Who'd have thunk it?" I replied. He was getting close. No matter how much levity Sasha and I tried to employ to round out the edges of this disturbing ritual, his screaming and pleading still made my heart race. I hated him, more like I hated whatever was beneath and controlling this pitiful, infuriatingly repetitive spectacle. I got that urge again to bully him, bully it, to actually hurt whatever was actually in there. He slowed down, got to the fence, laced his fingers through the chain link, and pressed his face between his hands. I ignored his pleas and walked up close, and Sasha yelled from behind me, "Babe, stop! Shoot him!" I forced a smile at the man. "Hey, bud, I know you're in there. I gotta tell you something." And I leaned in. "This land is mine now. I took it from you." Like the first time I spoke to him in that tone, his reaction was shocking and immediate. His facial features underwent a complete and utter purge of a discernible emotion. He looked to his left, blankly staring out to the west. I looked back at Sasha. Her jaw was dropped, looking at me in disbelief. I looked back at him and saw that inkling of recognition and awareness creep back into the man's face. He looked back at me with an urgent confusion. The bear was no more than 15 feet behind him, and then I saw it. A subtle recognition, followed immediately by a flicker of anger in his eyes. And then I put a bullet in his forehead. He dropped so hard and so fast, his knees smashed into his jaw, shattering his 2 front teeth. And then he splayed out backwards, arms limp and flailing over his head, dead as a doornail, with what looked like gallons of blood gushing from his nose and ears. Sheesh, 44 sure is a big old slug. Sasha then let go of Dash and slowly walked up to my side. The bear had broken its charge and come to a full stop, looking down at the dead, naked man. Then it picked its big head up to look at Dash, who wagged his tail in salutation and nodded. Sasha and I were immediately overcome with the exact same sensation we got in the spring when the light goes away after we start a fire. An indescribable, somatic and emotional sensation of exquisite relief. The bear looked up at me, and in that brief gaze I saw, or I felt only one thing, a warning. I looked down, scooped up the man's forearm in its jaws, and dragged him off into the evening sun. Sash and I reached for each other's hand in that same moment, and a gust of wind blew, carrying with it a twisting group of leaves from the cottonwood tree above us. The first yellow leaves of the season. Wow, 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 wow. Absolutely awesome as ever from the wonderfully talented VatoCabron. Thank you ever so much, brother, for allowing me to narrate your work. I know everyone's enjoying this one as much as I. Fantastic spine tingling, and a mysterious piece of work. As ever, guys and girls, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. Looking forward to getting stuck in after a couple of days with family, so keep your eyes peeled for the uploads. Should be coming thick and fast over the next few days. As ever, if you have a story you'd like to share with us here on the show, whether a true or fictional piece, please do get it over to my email, which is dmtfrostoffear@gmail.com. As always, guys, I hope you're well and happy, and above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.